The stomach is a J-shaped expandable sac. It contains a band of circular muscle sphincters that guards the opening at each end to help regulate contents going into and out of the stomach. If the sphincter leading from the esophagus into the stomach is weak, then the individual may experience heartburn. The stomach, when empty, can hold 1/4 cup without stretching. The walls have folds that expand to enlarge it as it fills. When fully extended, can hold several liters of food. The wall of the stomach's, the smooth muscle and the walls of the stomach have basically 3 layers: circular, oblique, and longitudinal. Functions of the stomach include that it stores food and regulates its release into the small intestine. It liquefies food, forms chyme when it leaves the stomach. Coming into the stomach, food was known as a bolus. When it leaves the stomach, within the stomach, and leaving the stomach into the small intestine, it's referred to as chyme. And the stomach is the area of the digestive tract that begins the chemical digestion of proteins. The chemical digestion of starch, of sugars, begin in the mouth, whereas the chemical digestion of proteins begins in the stomach. The stomach contains gastric glands. Some secrete hydrochloric acid. This acts not only to kill bacteria, also breaks down the connective tissue of meat, but it's important. Hydrochloric acid is important because it activates pepsinogen, which becomes pepsin, and pepsin is the enzyme that digests protein. So hydrochloric acid must be present to activate the inactive pepsinogen to form the pepsin enzyme that will digest proteins. Some cells of the stomach secrete intrinsic factor, which is a protein necessary for the absorption of vitamin B12 from the small intestine. Intrinsic factor is not a factor in digestion, but B12 is important in nucleic acid metabolism, as well as B12 deficiency can result in pernicious anemia and impair nerve functioning. This shows the image of the stomach showing the 3 layers, and by having these 3 different layers running in different directions, when they contract, it's allowing this food to produce this churning motion and aiding with digestion, because it's being the contraction is occurring in basically 3 different planes. And these sphincters that you see are just the circular rings of muscle that's located from the esophagus into the stomach. That was the one they were referring to, that if it were weak could cause heartburn. And then there's also a sphincter leading from the stomach into the small intestine, which is going to regulate the food release into the small intestine. It will be kind of done in squirts. This shows gastric glands within the stomach that we just talked about. The mucus secreting cells, those are important as those help protect the lining of the stomach. The pepsinogen secreting cells, those are the inactive form. Hydrochloric acid secreting cells, which is going to activate the pepsinogen to become pepsin to digest proteins, as well as the blood vessels. The stomach itself is protected from the gastric juice by several factors. One, by the mucus layer. Pepsin is produced in the inactive form of pepsinogen, so it cannot digest cells that produce it, because we also were made of proteins. The stomach is also under neural and hormonal mechanisms that time the release of this gastric juice to coincide with food entering the stomach. Food absorbs and dilutes the gastric juice, and the stomach lining is replaced rapidly. Approximately every 3 days, there is the new lining replaced. The small intestine is where the region of the gastrointestinal tract where absorption of our nutrients actually occurs. Contains 3 regions: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is the first region of the small intestine from the stomach, from which the chyme enters. It's going to enter in squirts. It's also going to be the region where entry of pancreatic and liver digestive enzymes occurs. In the jejunum, it's a site of chemical digestion and absorption, and the ileum also site of chemical digestion and absorption. The functions of the small intestine is chemical digestion and absorption. Chemical digestion, carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids, and fats are broken down into their simplest forms, and this is performed by enzymes of the pancreas and small intestine, also aided by bile. Bile is produced in the liver. However, it's stored in the gallbladder and released into the small intestine. Bile aids in digestion and absorption of fats. Lipids entry into the small intestine stimulate cholecystokinin release that stimulates the pancreas to release the digestive enzymes and the gallbladder to release bile. So once these lipids, these fats, enter into the small intestine, it's going to stimulate this cholecystokinin to be released. Upon its release, the pancreas is going to release digestive enzymes, and the gallbladder will also release bile. Bile is just a mixture of water ions, cholesterol, bile pigments, and bile salts. How bile acts is that it helps to emulsify fats and liquids. This separation exposes these fats to the enzyme lipase, making chemical absorption of fats faster and more complete. Absorption, the small intestine is the primary site. Now the small intestine is 20 feet long compared to 5 feet of the large intestine. So when it refers to the small intestine, it's talking about diameter, not length. The small intestine structures have specializations that increase the surface area for this being the primary site of absorption. It's got a pleated lining, which are circular folds that increase the surface area. They have villi, which increase the surface area another 10-fold. And then they have microvilli on the villi that increase it still even greater. Each villi contains thousands of microvilli, and these microvilli increase the surface area another 20-fold. All three together, the pleated lining, the villi, and the microvilli, increase the surface area of the small intestine to the approximate size of a tennis court. Each villus or villi has a network of capillaries and a lacteal, which a lacteal is the lymphatic vessel, and this is also going to play an important role in delivery of nutrients. Capillaries carry away the absorbed products of protein and carbohydrate digestion, as well as ions and water. However, lacteal, which are these lymphatic vessels, are the structure that carries away absorption products of fat in the form of chylomicrons. Chylomicrons are just basically protein-coated products of fat digestions that are soluble in water. Fats are too large to pass through capillaries, thus they enter through the lymphatic system, which then returns them to the thoracic ducts at the base of the neck, and thus back into the bloodstream. So lacteals transport fatty acids. And so this just shows those circular folds that we were talking about of the small intestine, increasing its absorption area. These show the villi and the mucosa, which would be the mucus secreting layer, the submucosa, which would contain the nerve, blood vessels, and lymphatic vessels. Another imagery showing the villus, and then the studded with all the microvilli on it that increased it another 20-fold for surface area. This shows the process of carbohydrate absorption, where a polysaccharide is broken down to a disaccharide, to a monosaccharide, and then to the simplest compounds that our body uses, to glucose, which is then transported through the capillary system from digestion. This, again, protein absorption, proteins broken down to peptides, to the building blocks of amino acid, transported to the capillaries to be delivered to the body for usage. This is shows the imagery of fat absorption. Fats are too large to be absorbed into the bloodstream. In the presence of bile salts, these fats, these lipids, it emulsifies them, which allows them to be suspended so that enzymes, lipase, can bind to them, producing bile salts, fatty acid, and monoglycerides, to micelles, to a chylomicron, which is the protein-coated fat globule. It's going to be transported to the lacteal and transported in the lymphatic system to the thoracic duct, which will eventually merge into the bloodstream. Thus, the body has access to the fats that we need.